Eve. Welcome to my new room. I'm starting to redecorate. You can see here, I'm not going to get a 6 on Room Rater anymore. We're still working on it. We got work to do. Appreciate all of you being here. This is the most fun an adult political operative can have, I think, hanging out with all of you. We're going to get going here in a second. We're also going to be going live on YouTube. For those who are going to be coming in through YouTube, we have some coming in over Zoom, some over YouTube. And in fact, we just went live on YouTube. Okay, we're going to begin in about 60 seconds, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Simon Rosenberg here from Washington, D.C. And we have people, continuing to dial in. And let's just get going. I'm going to just get going. I know folks are getting in, and let me boot up the presentation. Okay, can you all see that? Dude Link, can you just confirm via text that you can see everything here before we get going? Okay, I think we're going to get, okay, let's get going. And Dude, just text me if you can make sure this thing is moving, and we're going to get going. Sorry for the little delay here. Trying some new fancy stuff tonight in terms of production values. So let's go. So this presentation, I'm Simon Rosenberg from NDN, and this is a presentation that we've been doing in various stages over the last 6 years since Trump became elected president in 2017. This is sort of the grandchild of that original presentation. It's called With Democrats, Things Get Better. And we like to describe it as the most important and least understood story in American politics today. I'm going to share it with you, and I hope that you're going to share it widely with your community around the country. Our story begins in 1989. And by the way, I'm not going to be taking any questions during the course of the presentation. And we will have plenty of time for discussion afterwards. This will take about 30 minutes altogether. So our story begins in 1989, when the Cold War ended and a new era of globalization began. I think that we forget sometimes just how significant a change this was from the world of communism and capitalism and the unaligned nations into a new single global order that America had started to build in the 1940s. And since 1989, the world has really gone through tumultuous change. Much of it very good for the world, some of it not so good. But it really is change, as they like to say, is a constant in our life. And it is fair, I think, to evaluate the two parties since 1989 through the lens of, which party has managed against change better, given that the world is no longer the world of Reagan and the Cold War. We've moved on. How have the two parties responded to these big changes that that I just laid out? And let me just do one thing here. Sorry, we're trying some new stuff tonight. So let's have a look and let's see how the two parties have done in this new age. So number one, on the most basic measure on jobs created on their watch, you can see that Democrats have done far better than Republicans repeatedly since 1989. Trump was the first president since Herbert Hoover to have had net job loss on his watch. And we've seen very strong economic growth in all three Democratic presidents, far less so under Republicans. And in fact, the three Republicans have all seen recession on their watch since 1989. When you, it is kind of remarkable, and that, we've seen, I'm going to see if that's a typo there, but we've seen so much job growth under Biden, and we've had very little job growth under the Republicans over 16 years. This is 16 years of Clinton and Obama, right? 34 million, 16 years of the Bushes and Trump. Okay, we are having, I'm going to get out. I feel like we are having technical issues here. Okay, sorry, everybody. We're going to reboot. I can see the questions. Sorry. This is, I had a feeling something was happening here. Just let me try to come back. I'm going to start all over if that's okay with everybody. Sorry. Oh, we do see that people can see. Okay. God, what is happening here? Give me one more second here. This is the first time this has happened like this in a long time. Okay. I'm going to do it inside. I'm going to do it inside of, I'm using a new computer tonight, and that may be part of the issue, but I'm going to do this inside of PowerPoint. So you're not going to see the full screen as you were seeing. And I think hopefully this will move and people will be able to see it. Dudlene, if you can confirm. So just to begin, boom, we're rebooting. Our story begins in 1989. The Cold War ends, a new era of globalization begins. And, we start to see enormous change happen in the world. This is my list of things. Everyone may have their own list. And it really is a sign of, this has been a period where the change is constant. This idea that we can go back to a place before, and the kind of nostalgia that we've seen in the Trump era is so misplaced. We're seeing a time of tumultuous change, historic change. And it's my view that one of the ways that we really have to evaluate the two American political parties is through managing against change. How have they done since the Cold War ended and this new age of globalization began? And this really is the central question that we're going to ask in this presentation tonight. And what we find when we look at the data is that Democrats have repeatedly performed well when in power, that things have gotten better, and Republicans haven't. Under Trump, we've seen, even we saw with Trump, the first president to have job loss on their watch since Herbert Hoover. And certainly this has been 3 disappointing Republican presidents in a row. We've seen strong growth under Democrats, 3 consecutive recessions under Republicans. When you look at the data here, this is 16 years of Obama and Clinton, 34 million jobs, 16 years of Bush's and Trump, just 2 million jobs. Biden's already had 12 million jobs in just 2 years. I have a typo there in the top of the screen, but really remarkable comparison in terms of performance, right? Biden's had 6 times the amount of job growth in just 2 years as the last 3 Republicans had over 16 years. And this breaks it down. This breaks it down here. Last month, we had 517,000 jobs created in 1 month. That would be more than 4 years of GOP growth at the rate that they've created jobs. Republicans have only created 10,000 jobs a month over 16 years. This is what Clinton and Obama did. This is what Biden did. And I just want to put it in comparison, right? That's 4 years. In 1 month, we had 4 years of Republican job growth in one single month last month, right? So part of why it's a little bit difficult for me to accept the Republican criticisms of Joe Biden's presidency is that when they've had an opportunity to govern, they've failed repeatedly, and we haven't. This is the unemployment rate over time. It's gone up under Republicans. It's gone way down under Democrats. And then this is sort of the killer slide of the deck. You see me promote this a lot, that since 1989, there have been 48 million net new jobs created in America. 46 million of those, basically all of them, have been created under Democratic presidents. We need, I think, as Democrats, those of you who listen, read my stuff and listen to our videos and things, we talk about how we have to establish this basic contrast between our strong performance and their repeated failure. This data is there for all of you to use to help us establish this contrast in the coming months. GDP growth tells a similar story, right? We've seen very strong GDP growth, under Biden, more than 3 times what it was under Trump. And you can see Clinton had 4% GDP growth for over 8 years, really a remarkable statistic. And, again, Democrats, Republicans really obsess about GDP. It's one of their central data points, and we've been much better than them. We also know that the market has gone crazy since 1989, and this new age of globalization began. This probably is the period of greatest wealth creation in American history. Our companies went global. They went from 1 billion to 2 billion customers to 7 billion customers. We were in better shape than any other global companies to take advantage of this new global customer base. And we've seen the stock market explode, right? This is the S&P, but the Dow has gone up 16-fold since 1989. I've got to extend that little thing on the left here. And so this has been a period of enormous corporate success, wealth success for the United States. And as you can see, almost all, again, the market, this is the Dow. The Dow has grown far more under Democratic presidents than Republican presidents, right? So job growth, Democrats, wealth creation, Democrats, right, done much better. And then in terms of what Democrats care about, though, is how is that wealth distributed? How are people doing, right? Not just the aggregate economy. And you can see that this is just a slide that, since 1989, we have seen families have prospered. They've gotten wealthier, not 16 times wealthier, right, as you had if you had money in the stock market. But all races and parts of our family, our extended family, are doing better today than they were in 1989. These are in real terms, right? And this is another way of cutting the data. And one of the reasons I show this graph is that you hear some people argue in the debate that, wages and incomes have been flat for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. That's just not true, right? That's not true. What is true is that it's gone up much more under Democrats and done far worse under Republicans. Both the Bushes saw median income drop on their presidencies, right? And so we shouldn't be using this idea that there's been a flatlining or there's been no growth, because that doesn't tell the proper story. The proper story is we've seen good growth happen under Democrats, less and not under Republicans. And using this idea that, look, what I want to be very clear about is that $12,000 gain that you see here is not sufficient. We shouldn't be satisfied, but it's also just not true that people aren't doing better than they were. They haven't fallen behind. There hasn't been American carnage, as Trump talked about. And on the deficit, which is something we're going to be talking about quite a bit in the coming months, again, it's a similar story. Democrats have seen very substantial decrease in the deficit on their watch. It's gone up under the last 3 Republican presidents. If there was one party that was the party of fiscal responsibility, it's been us, not them. And Trump had, an historically awful track record on the deficit. I mean, this is Trump's deficit as a percentage of GDP. You can see it's unmatched in the post-World War era. It's really an extraordinary thing. And it was going up, and it went up. And to be very clear, the deficit went up every year of Trump's presidency. It's gone down every year of Biden's presidency, right? So the story that they're trying to tell of Democrats being fiscally profligate, the Republicans have created far more of the debt that we have historically than the Democrats. Bill Clinton actually got us to surplus. And if George Bush had left Bill Clinton's tax and spending rates in place, the entire debt of the United States would have been wiped out by 2010, right? And so this idea that somehow they're the party of fiscal rectitude, we're the party of profligacy, it's absurd. And even on the debt ceiling, right? The debt ceiling has been raised far more under Republican presidents than Democratic presidents. So again, this has been a tool that Republicans have used more than we have during this time, further making this whole thing so preposterous. And I do think it's really important to recognize how fundamentally ridiculous the Republican economic arguments are that we're hearing from Kevin McCarthy and his brethren, right? His brothers and sisters, is that, you hear them say every day that we shouldn't be spending all this money in Ukraine, we should be spending it here at home. Well, Joe Biden just expanded public investment in the United States more than any time since the 1960s, spending it here at home, right? And then their answer to that is they want to cut all of that, right? They want to see massive cuts in these things that they claim they want to spend here at home, right? I mean, this is the basic logic flow that we're dealing with here. I mean, we know that MAGA is not very good at math, it's not very good at data, But I do think I think we're at the point where mocking them for their ridiculous arguments is something we have to get better at. And so let's just go through now some data about the Biden presidency, and so we can understand how much better things are today than when he came into office, right? First of all, we've had the best COVID recovery of any G7, of any major developing country. This is something that I'm very proud of, right? And I think we should all be very proud of. Thanks, Joe Biden, right? We are currently at the lowest peacetime unemployment rate since World War II, because the only two times that we're lower than we are now were during the Vietnam and Korean Wars, and we're the lowest that we've been now in 55 years. Really extraordinary achievement by Joe Biden and the Democrats. The uninsured rate is lower than it's ever been. Just a few months ago, the poverty rate was the lowest that it had ever been. So under the Biden presidency, we've had the lowest peacetime unemployment rate since World War II, lowest poverty rate, lowest uninsured rate in American history, right? This is all just basic fact data. New business formations are continuing to be new businesses are being created at an historically elevated rate. This is something that happened during COVID. It's continued, right? Remote work. We don't really totally understand this yet, but it's very encouraging, right? More new businesses. This is the dynamism of the American economy, can-do spirit of the American people. It's been full force during the Biden presidency. And on wages, wages continue to be growing at a very elevated level. And this is one of the reasons why I waged a big campaign in 2022 to argue that Republicans were inflating the impact of inflation. They were exaggerating the impact of inflation because wages were also at very elevated levels. And in fact, we now know that real wages were up in 2022. So people didn't fall behind on the aggregate in 2022, even with inflation, right? I mean, this is really important. And we know that where the wage gains were the greatest were people at the bottom end, right? Where wages went up the most. And people, this is a slide that came from Steve Ratner, who's often on Morning Joe, that, because of low unemployment, government support during COVID, right, high wage increases, people at the bottom 50% of workers have more money in the bank than they've had in a very long time. So again, this whole kind of narrative from the right that America's suffering, Joe Biden's the worst president in American history, people were falling behind. I mean, it's not true, right? I mean, this was so fundamentally, and this is one of the reasons I think we did better in this last election than people thought we were going to, is because the Republican narrative of the economy was exaggerated. It wasn't accurate. It wasn't really what people were feeling in their lives. We have more job openings now per unemployed people than at any time in modern history. 2 jobs are open for every 1 unemployed person. The trade deficit, which is something that supposedly Donald Trump cared about a lot, has come way down during the last few years. And crime rates, which is something that is also very much in the discussion, are far lower than they were a generation ago. I mean, this is a huge societal achievement. And yes, they bumped up a little bit in recent years. And certainly the dislocation due to COVID created, there was a spike in murder rates in some places. Many places that's come down. But it's really important as we go into these debates to recognize that the murder rate is much higher in red states than it is in blue states. And this sort of idea that the Republicans are pushing that, Democratic parts of the country are crime riddled and, dangerous places. I mean, you're far more likely to get murdered in Republican states than you are in Democratic states. This is, again, another red wavy kind of ridiculous fiction that has permeated our discourse. And on something that Republicans talk about a lot, in fact, this week they're talking about the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. They talk about the war on energy, the war on oil that Joe Biden is launched. What we know is that this year we're going to have more oil produced in the United States than any year in American history. America is now a net exporter of oil and gas, right? And also the profits of domestic American oil companies are at an all-time high. If this is a war, more oil than ever before, all-time profits, it's not going very well, right? It's not an effective war. I mean, again, this is another ridiculous talking point from the right that is just not, is red wavy and it's false and it's fallaciousness and it's falsehood. Until recently, the number of undocumented immigrants also had really fallen. They fell under the the Obama Biden administration. We were not for open borders. We're not for open borders now. This is a discourse that we need to take back from the right. I think we can. I think Joe Biden has begun to sort of, really engage in this and not let them, again, have this red wavy kind of bullshit that goes into our discourse. And so how are we doing in America, right? Like, let's just review this where we are right now, right? I mean, we may be living in the strongest economy that we've all ever been in. Because in addition to all these things that I just went through, obviously people of color and women have more economic opportunities in America than they've ever had before. And so, we're living in an extraordinary period of economic growth and opportunity in the United States. I mean, we should all be really proud of this. America is better today by most measures than it's ever been. And this is something we have to talk about in a far more open way. And what's important, particularly because of the Republican narrative around immigration, is that all these good things that I just went through, right, all happened while we went through a period of mass migration. And so rather than the Republican narrative, which is all these people we let into the country have made us worse, all these people we let into the country made us better, right? Like, things are better today than they were. And so we have to lean into this immigration debate. We have nothing to fear, in my mind, about in this immigration debate. And in fact, since Trump became president, by most measures, people's feelings about immigration and immigrants have actually gotten, better. People value immigrants more. I think Trump forced people to really think about these things in ways they hadn't thought about them. And the good news is they came out in the right place, right? Which is terrific, for all of us. And we also know that in our coalition anyway, there isn't big dissatisfaction with trade in immigration, globalization in our coalition. There is much more so on the right. So by many measures today, things are better than they were certainly 2 years ago, and perhaps better than they've ever been. We need to be loud and proud about this. But our success, I apologize here, this is our success. I don't know why it's not filling the screen, but our success in this age has not just been in governing, but it's been in politics too, right? And let's go through this. Pardon me. This is the presidential results going back to 1992. When I went to go work for Bill Clinton in 92, we had lost 5 out of the previous 6 presidential elections. We had not broken 50.1 since 1964. The Republicans were the dominant, national force in presidential elections. And 2 of those elections, by the way, were historic blowouts, right? They weren't just 3 yards in a cloud of dust, but we got, blown out. And even after Watergate, we barely won that election in 1976. And so part of what Bill Clinton tried to do is he tried to create a politics that would allow us to win national elections again. And amazingly, that since 1992, we've won more votes in 7 out of 8 elections. It's an incredible achievement by the Democratic Party. We've been outperforming them repeatedly. We know that 2 of those elections we didn't actually win because of our crazy system that we have, right? But certainly we have been far better at winning the popular vote. If you look at the GOP vote, right, they've only broken 48% once, going all the way back to 1992. And the idea that they control 2/3 of the Supreme Court is just insane, right, given their actual performance with actual voters, right? I also want to just mark that 2022 was an extraordinary election for us. I mean, in 2018 and 2020, we stripped the House, the Senate, and the presidency from the Republicans and MAGA. In this election, though, I think this will become known in future analysis as one of the most remarkable elections in American history. Thanks to all of you who worked so hard. We gained ground in 7 of the major battleground states. We picked up a Senate seat. We picked up 4 state House chambers. We didn't lose any House chambers. We picked up 3 governorships, kept the House close, which is really important for 2024. We did better in the early vote than we did in 2018 and 2020, which is just kind of a stunning achievement. Our candidates dramatically outraised Republicans. Our grassroots got much more muscular and stronger. And in the last 2 elections, we've done better in the southwestern part of the United States than we've done in 80 years. Joe Biden, when he won Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, and Nevada, was the first Democrat to win those 4 states since 1940. And in Arizona now, we did better in this last 2 elections than we've done since the 1940s, 1950s. We've had tremendous growth in the Southwest in recent elections, tremendous performance in the Southwest in recent elections. Our party is politically very, very strong. And during this period of since 1989, for most of this period, this is, party ID. Are you Democrat, Republican? We've dramatically outperformed Republicans in terms of party ID. We dramatically outperformed them in the popular vote. There are just more Democrats than Republicans, right? And so part of, if I'm right in my theory here, then the people who came of age after Reagan, people in their mid to late 40s and younger, should be much more Democrat than Republican, right? Just based on their lived experience. 3 good Democratic presidents, 3 crappy Republican presidents, 1, crazy orange guy who was just in office. So people who are younger should be more Democratic. And that's what's happened. We have a big structural advantage with under 45-year-old voters. This is, even Biden in 2020 was plus 17 with under 45-year-old voters. In this last election, it was somewhere between 13 and 20. The exits had it at 13, Pew had it at 20. So I'm probably gonna end up going with 13 here. But even that's, just put it in comparison, right? Biden in 2020 did better than Obama did, right? With under 45-year-old voters. This has become a big structural advantage. This electorate used to be a jump ball, right? This was a jump ball electorate. It would go back and forth. It's not anymore. We're getting large structural margins from under 45, and under 30, it's even more pronounced, obviously, right? And so I want to be clear that Biden's done well, with younger voters despite his age, because this is a structural thing that's happened. And I think abortion could even further cement this, and we can talk about that in the Q&A. This all matters because the electorate is becoming much more of the people that are much more Democratic, right? And so the Republicans still do face a demographic time bomb here. They're doing really well with older white voters as the country is becoming younger and more diverse. And, this is really important for us in terms of how we build our politics going forward. So despite all the success, I want to say that there's one area that we have a lot of work to do on, which is our standing on the economy. And you just saw me go through all these slides showing how well we've done. They've done nothing. We've done all this good stuff. And yet voters don't see that at all. They just don't see it. Biden in the 2020 election, on COVID, with COVID voters here at 41% of the electorate were COVID voters. We won those voters 3-1. On the voters who said the economy was the most important, we lost those voters 4-1 to Trump in the middle of a recession, right? And then on the basic question of who's better able to handle the economy, Trump beat Biden by 12 points. Joe Biden did not establish a fundamental connection to voters on the economy in 2020. He established it on COVID. That's why he became president. And so we have a deficiency. We have a hole that we're digging out of here. And I can just show you lots of data showing this is June 16th of 2021. We're plus 27 here on COVID, plus 20 in healthcare, only plus 4 on the economy. And this is when the economy is booming, in the spring of 2021. I'm going to skip this for time reasons. And this is just a poll from early January this year. Biden is -6 here in his job approval, and he's -13 on his economic job approval. This is a millstone around his brand. I mean, this is something that we have to fix this year if we want to have the kind of election in 2024 that we all want to have. And I want to, again, show you this is Navigator data. Look at these advantages we have in abortion healthcare. This is from January, right? We got these big advantages on jobs in the economy. We're negative. On inflation, we're negative, right? We're down here in negative territory on economic issues. We need to get into positive territory. And the good news is that in this Navigator research that they just released, and you should go and check it out, it's really worth spending time with, they show that if you tell people about what we've done, we can go from being down -5 in the economy to being +3. I think that's good. I'm not satisfied with this, with the +3, right? But I think that but the point is that if we make a big economic argument this year, we can move voters and we can start to get into positive territory. We have to be in positive territory in the economy by the end of the year. This is critical. This is the most, in my view, the most important political job for us this year. So let me conclude this presentation with some meditations, thoughts, aspirations, me sharing my hopes and dreams with all of you. So first, one of the big lessons of this time is that we have to reject this basic left-right, this symmetrical argument that the country is basically a left and a right. Right? We've shown you that there are more Democrats than Republicans. We continually get more votes than they do. The two parties have not performed the same. And there's been sort of the better way to think about this is not left-right. It's sort of there's a good party and a party that's not so good. And that's contrast between our repeated success, their repeated failure, is something that we have to invest more time and energy in trying to put it into the national discourse. It's not only advantageous to us as Democrats, it's also true. And getting to another place where you obscure the repeated failures of the Republican Party is getting to a place of propaganda and disinformation, right? And so we have to, in terms of reestablishing truth and in our discourse, this is really important. To me, this current moment feels a lot more like 1945 and 1946 than perhaps 1933 and 1934, right? When we look at these historical comparisons, the world is going through a collective trauma like World War II, and we are also now in an almost an existential fight to preserve democracy as it's being assaulted by autocratic impulses around the world and also here at home. That our party, which was called to fight World War II and to build a global order after World War II, that was our greatest moment as Democrats, in my view. And I think we're being called on to do it again. I often think about this speech and how seminal this was. I mean, the Four Freedoms speech that FDR gave in 1941, by the way, he gave it in 41, which established the basic way that we looked at the world after World War II, was all based on top of freedom. Everything that he did was built on top of freedom. And you hear many, including my friends at Future Majority, talking about how we have to reclaim freedom as a value, right, because of Roe and other things. But this has been the core fundamental value. This is what liberalism is all about, right? Is about protecting freedoms. And FDR came up with this incredibly elegant formulation that now was in the basis in the Charter of the United Nations and the Atlantic Charter. These four freedoms are the basic orientation of the entire world that was built after World War II. And that world that we built, that our party imagined and built, right? We didn't build it upon autocracy. We didn't, we forced the European powers to release their colonial holdings, right? We built a world around freedom and opportunity and democracy. And today we are living in a golden age in the world. In every way that you measure human progress, we are so far ahead of where we were in the 1940s, right? Life expectancy has exploded. More people live under democracy today than any time in human history, right? There's been more wealth created and there's more opportunity for the people of the world than any time in human history. The ability to travel, to learn, to access to the internet, all these things. There's never been a moment like this in human history. And this is the poverty rate that's plummeted, right? Even though population has exploded. And what's important for us to recognize as we look at this data and think about this is that we did this. Our party did this. And it's why when I give these presentations, I talk about the Democratic Party may have done, as an organized political entity, may have done more good for the people of the world than any other organized political entity in all of human history, because we've helped imagine and create a golden age built on top of freedom, right? Those four freedoms. And so we need to lean, part of as we go forward, I think we have to connect ourselves to our own history a little bit more. I think we've become disconnected from it a little bit. I think we've lost some of the greatness and the nobility of the Democratic Party and the things that we've done. This is my list. You can come up with your own list. It's extraordinary what we've done, over the last 100 years. And we've imagined a world that's created more opportunity than any time in human history. We've continued to stay focused on improving things here in the United States that needed to be improved upon. Joe Biden has been obviously an incredibly successful president. I mean, we've done so much good here, everybody, and we have to get more connected to that as we go out and make the arguments that we need to make sure that MAGA doesn't prevail in the coming years. And I think for the GOP, I often talk about how, they just failed to do their part, that we did good and they failed to do their part. And when I started this presentation, that's what I talked about. But we know that it's worse than that, right? It's not just failure. It's that the Republican Party has become a malevolent force in our life. And we have to, just as we need to be honest about our strong performance and their not strong performance, we need to be more honest about this too. We need to be more honest about how dangerous they've become. I think voters know this. I think it's in the discourse. They understand it. They need to be reminded of it, right? There are ways that we had the election deniers, and the ending of Roe was our gateway into reminding voters that these guys were still a little too crazy. But we need to keep these things front and center because it's a serious matter, right? I mean, we are all living in the reality that if we lose an election, we could lose our democracy. And so we have to keep this front and center because it's our obligation to the American people to be truthful to them about the challenges that we face. And so when people talk about, what's gone wrong with America, American carnage, all this thing, I just want everybody to remember one thing, right? 96% of all jobs created since 1989 have been created under Democratic presidents, right? We've done our part. It isn't that our politics is broken, Washington isn't broken, the Republican Party is what's broken. And we need to be fair-minded about this. And if you need any reminders about how broken it is, right? I mean, let's just go through a quick reminder here. Thanks, everybody. I hope you'll join me in being loud and proud about our achievements. We have to go sell our good work to the American people. I think they'll be receptive if they hear the story. We have to regain a little bit of our self-confidence. And I wanted to say that, I think that as we were called before to defend freedom and democracy, we're being called again. And I look forward to continuing this fight with you in the coming months and years. Sorry for the technical problems tonight. Let me stop the share and turn it on to Q&A. And all of you, if you're watching on YouTube, unfortunately, we don't have a way of you asking questions yet. We're still working on that. But if you're here on Zoom, you can use the Q&A box. We all know how this works. And I know there are some hands raised. And so I'm going to call on Mary Ann first. Hello, Mary Ann.
Hi, Simon.
Hey, welcome. What's on your mind, Mary Ann?
Oh, I'm just really excited about everything you've got to say there. I'm wondering if you're going to share the deck on your website.
So it's a great question, and everyone always asks that. I share the presentation.
That's what I meant.
And and the presentation, I'm doing it again tomorrow, and given the technical problems we've had tonight, I'll probably share tomorrow's presentation. Also, my room looks a little better during the day than it does at night. But there is also a version of it from January 26th that you can share. But the way to think about this presentation is I do it every month. I'm going to do it on a Wednesday night and a Thursday afternoon. It's new every time. I spent probably 2 hours today, 2.5, more than that, updating it, changing language, honing arguments, pulling slides in and out. So, if you've seen it before, every time you see it, it's going to be different, right? And fresh, I hope. There's also a lot of supporting information on our website at ndn.org on a lot of the core economic stuff is there, which you can get. And also I do, on Twitter, I do threads that have many of the charts and graphs that you can copy and paste into whatever you want. Just try to give us credit, right? I mean, obviously a lot of work went into this over a long period of time. I mean, this is 30 years of being in the fight, and lots of money went into creating this thing. And one of the reasons I don't release it is because it changes so much that I don't want old versions lying around, because it's really critical we stay on top of the data. I did Fox News 3 times a week for all of the Obama presidency. I've been on Fox thousands of times. And I can tell you, I know from being in these kinds of arguments that you can't have anything wrong in the data you have. It's got to be the latest data, because you get caught and challenged, right? You guys challenge me, right? I get challenged on Twitter every day. If I don't have it perfect, right, people let me know. And so, but yes, and also feel free to invite people to come tomorrow as well, Mary Ann. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Simon. I follow you on Twitter as well.
Okay, thank you. Let me go to Terry. Fire away. Hold on, Terry. Let me get you in here. Terry, are you there? Hold on. Terry, let me try one more thing here to get you in here. I don't know if you can. We're having our fair share. I'm going to go to the Q&A box for a second, and just why see if I can get Terry. Can you? I think you're on, Terry.
Okay, I didn't have a question. The only time I got on was to let you know that the presentation wasn't going the technical aspects.
Okay, thank you.
That was it. That was a long time ago.
Well, thank you, Terry. Appreciate you being here with us tonight. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, let me go to Sam, my old buddy, and then I'll go to the boxes. Sam, jump in here.
Unmute. What can you tell us about the Senate races coming up and what we need to?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. I didn't, I do a monthly political presentation. This is my With Dems presentation. And so I usually spend more time in that presentation talking about the political outlook. But here's what I think about 2024 right now. I think we're favored in the presidential race. I think that we are, we did better in those 7 battleground states than we did in 2020. We've now had 3 consecutive elections where MAGA has underperformed in the battleground. I think battleground voters know MAGA, and I think there isn't really, whether it's Trump or DeSantis. I mean, DeSantis is every bit as MAGA as Trump is, and so I think that that we are going to have. I think, Sam, the opportunity, whether it's Biden or somebody else, I think that we will be, if he chooses not to run, I think we're favored in the presidential race. The Senate race, the Senate is going to be really hard. We've got to defend 3 states that are going to be very difficult in a presidential year, West Virginia, Ohio, and Montana. And we've still got to be competitive in the rest of the battleground. So the Senate map is more difficult. I mean, the good news is that in 2022, all of our incumbent senators won, which was a remarkable thing. And so, it's going to be a brawl, though, in the Senate. And in the House, I think we're favored to win it back. I mean, there are 18 Republicans in districts that Biden won. If we do well at the presidential level, we should be able to flip the House. They're reminding voters every day about their extremism and their MAGA-ness. And so, I'm optimistic, about our opportunities in the House. Susan DelBene, who's now the DCCC chair, is an old friend of ours and is one of the smartest and best members of Congress that I've ever worked with. We're in good hands there. And I also want to say I really think that the sort of elegant generational baton toss that happened from Pelosi to Hakeem Jeffries has been very successful. I love Hakeem. I think he's expanding our rhetorical palette. I think he's much more punchier in the news every day. I think the Democrats in the House feel strong and empowered and feel like they had a good election. There's just a good vibe in the House. It's not a vibe where they're down, right? Yeah, they lost power, but they want to go do battle with these guys. And so, I feel good about 2024. The key is, look, 2022 we did a good job. They're still a little too crazy, and our grassroots are better than theirs. Our campaigns are better than theirs. That is very likely to still be the structural framework in 2024, particularly if the economy is pretty good in 2024. If Putin looks like he's been wounded and we've been successful in Ukraine, we'll have a very strong track record to run on, right? And particularly with voters starting to understand the significance of the 3 big bills that we passed: CHIPS, infrastructure, and the Inflation Reduction Act, the climate bill, as I call it. People will start to understand these historic investments we've made. So, I would rather be us than them, Sam, in every possible way that you think about it.
Good. Glad to hear that.
Okay. Thanks, brother. It's good to see you. And let me come back onto the screen here. Let me go into some of the written questions from folks. Jan, hey, Jan, it's great to see you. I see media interviews where a reporter asked an administration official why voters do not give credit for them in the economy. That same reporter doesn't cover the achievements of the Biden administration. Yeah, look, I think that there was a lot of kind of general red wave stuff that happened over the last 18 months. I think there was a sense that Biden was wounded, that, he made errors in the fall of 2021, he'd come down. And there was just, I think Republican, the noise machine, the right-wing noise machine was just was given the benefit of the doubt far too much in the 2022 cycle. I mean, if you follow my election analysis, one of the reasons I believed we were going to do better than we did, I mean, than most people did, is that I believe that people understood that MAGA was a problem. And I think the mainstream media in DC has normalized the Republicans here in ways that are frankly dangerous. I mean, there's a normalization bias in our politics that is giving them a huge handicap on the golf course, if you want to call it that, right? Where, their extremism is being discounted, I think, in the national discussion every day. And it's a problem, and it's why it's incumbent upon us to reestablish this contrast that I described. It's incumbent upon us to be loud and proud and sell our accomplishments. And I think, Jan, you've heard me talk about this in other settings, and those of you who haven't seen some of the media on my YouTube channel where I talk about this stuff, I want to challenge all of us to become information warriors for democracy this year. I think we've been very successful politically in elections. We need to be operating though 24/7, 365. We need to get louder, because what happened in the election is that where we had our big campaigns, we were able to control the information environment, push turnout through the roof. We made gains. Where we didn't do that, right? And we fell back in New York and California, Texas, and Florida. And in part, that's a sign that the right-wing noise machine is still potent and powerful. We need to think of the war room, which I was part of 30 years ago, not as 20 kids drinking Red Bulls, getting sweaty, producing videos every day, but we need to think of it as 4 million people being wired and networked together and amplifying our information. I think 4 million passionate patriots who love their country, who are sharing the information that I and others are giving to all of you, getting it to 10 of your friends a day. You want to be aggressive but not obnoxious, right? In being an information warrior. But we have more power to take control, take back our discourse than we understand. They are networked and amplified. We aren't. We haven't done that yet as a party. We could have a long discussion about why that hasn't happened. But let's do it ourselves. We don't need permission from anybody. We can do it ourselves. That's why I do these presentations. That's why I release this information. That's why I go on Twitter, is I'm trying to help all of you become even more muscular citizens, right? To take these arguments and bring them to the American people. Jan, I'm very optimistic that what you noticed in Biden being much more aggressive and combative and in their face, is what we need to do now. And I'm very encouraged by what we saw coming out of the State of the Union and just the general attitude, and that's so I'm excited about where we are. I think we're being much more muscular and strong, and on offense, we feel good, right? We're not in retreat. We're not scared. We're strong. I mean, I have this basic mantra. I'm going on too long here, but that Joe Biden's been a good president, the country's better off, and the Democratic Party is strong. We can't let the Republican noise machine and the red wave stuff get us down. They put negative sentiment into our discourse. We need to put positive sentiment back. We can't let their negative sentiment machine make us feel less good about our country, our leaders, our party, all these things. We need to put more positive sentiment. That's what I'm trying to do in my own work. And so Heather said, amen. My message to everyone I know is Republicans have a billionaire funded media empire, and we have us. And Republican voters are not shy on social media. We shouldn't be either. And people are more influenced by their families and friends and what they think, believe than about politics than any politician. Thanks so much, Simon. I use your data on all social media all the time. Heather, you're exactly right. We have more agency here. We have more control over our own destiny than we understand. And I think we have to stop thinking that it's somebody else's job to go save the country. It's our job, right? It's what we have to do. It's the work that we have to do. That's why you're all here tonight. That's why you all volunteer in campaigns and do your texting and do your postcards, whatever it is, however you give back, right? But I'm asking you to do one more thing. I'm asking you to become an information warrior. I'm asking you to become conscious of spreading good information, positive information into your daily discourse, however you relate to people, right? Could be email, could be, church groups, could be in book clubs, right? Whatever it is, we all have ways of reaching folks. And we just need to be more aggressive about using our networks and being loud and proud, right? About who we are, what we've done, our president, our country, and be the proud patriots that we are, and not feel, I joke, I need to write about this. I often talk about how Democrats have to get really better at just declarative statements, right? Joe Biden is a good president, period. No but, right? Let the Republicans do the but. We have to just do the declarative statement. The economy is better today than it was 2 years ago. And then they can argue, but inflation. Let them make that argument. Don't make that argument for them, right? We have to get smarter about basic communications here than we often are as Democrats, right? We have to live more in declarative sentences and let the buts come from the people that attack us every day, who are pretty good at it, by the way. And so Terry asked a good question, and is that, are there competing organizations on my Twitter feed? I mean, on my YouTube page and on my website, there is an event I just did that I hosted with 4 organizations that I think are really important, that are relatively new to our family, that I want you to get to know and hopefully follow and engage with, right? One is the Midas Touch. These guys are kicking ass. It's a great new, powerful part of our family. Follow them, learn what they do. I think you'll enjoy being connected to them. They're proud pro-democracy information warriors themselves. Next is my old friend Joe Trippi has started a new pro-democracy media organization called Resolute Square, which is in its early days, but is very promising. And I'm being very supportive of that. Third, our good friend Tara McGowan, who, if you follow my work, I did a lot of events with her over the last 6 months. She started an organization called Courier Newsroom. They have pro-democracy, center-left media organizations in 9 battleground states, localized content. They're creating now a national overlay that's going to be rolling out this year. Very exciting. And then also Deep State Radio, which is a group that I did a lot of work with over the last 6 months. It's more like a Mercedes than a Taurus, a little bit more erudite, a little bit more wonkier, maybe more NPR than ABC. But David Rothkopf, who's the founder of Deep State, brilliant guy, love their work stuff. There are podcasts, some of this other stuff is video, right? You have your choices. So yes, there is new media coming to add on top of Pod Save America and Crooked Media, and groups like the New Republic and the traditional media organizations. We're seeing real innovation in the media space. It's very exciting. We do have a lot of work to do. I also want to say about Hispanics, and I'm just getting to the end here, is that we're not in as bad a shape, I think, as everybody says we are with Hispanics. There's been a little bit of a red wavy freak out that happened around this. I just went through the fact that in Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, we're doing better in those states than we've done in 80 years. That's because of the Hispanic vote. And the way to think about this is we might have a slightly smaller piece of a bigger pie, but that still means you get more pie, right? In 2004, our net margin nationally of Hispanic voters was about 700,000 votes. We've got 700,000 more Hispanic votes than Republicans. But because of the growth of the population, in 2020, we got at least 4.5 million more votes than Republicans, right? So our margins with Hispanics are growing. It's very encouraging for us. Let me see if there's one more here. Terry, if there's any more questions. Hey, I want to just close by saying that I'm sorry about the technical problems tonight. Dudlene and I will get to work and make sure it doesn't happen tomorrow. So that will be tomorrow's video will be the one that will be on the YouTube and everything tomorrow. So if you want to send people to it, just wait for the version that comes out tomorrow. And Catherine, when you talk about the transcript of the remarks, I need to think about transcripts. It's something I've been asked about this from others. We're going to start cutting up this presentation into more bite-sized bits. And that part at the end about FDR's 4 freedoms is going to be the first thing that we're going to cut up tomorrow after tomorrow's presentation, because I've gotten a lot of requests for that. And what I want to end with is this. If you go to the FDR library, go read about the 4 freedom speech. It is the most important political speech ever given in American English, in my view, even more consequential than Abraham Lincoln's powerful oratory during the Civil War, because of what it imagined and built and what came after it, right? And I went to the FDR library and I read, getting ready for this earlier today. I had never seen this before, and I've been an obsessive guy about the 4 freedoms, but they actually go through and talk about how it entered the draft of the State of the Union in 1941. And the moment when FDR dictated it, when they were writing the 4th or 5th draft, it was not in the earlier drafts. And the language that became the Four Freedoms came right out of his mouth and was written down by one of his speechwriters and then got into the speech. It's kind of an amazing story. And you can see the handwritten notes from those sessions that FDR did, those prep sessions in 1941. It feels very historic when you look at it. And I would just encourage you to do it. And for those of you in DC, or those who visit DC, the FDR Memorial, I think, does a really good job at capturing some of the rhetorical brilliance and power of FDR. And he's fallen out of history a little bit, in our memory a little bit. But the FDR Memorial is a very powerful place. I was just there a few weeks ago. Strongly recommend it for all of you. Listen, thanks everybody. Go fight, win, keep up the good work. Thanks for all that you do. Spread the good word about this work, about the good work of the Democratic Party. And remember, they get up every day, 24/7, 365, making their case. We got to do the same. Need you every day, everybody. Take care. Thank you.